The hotel key with my name and the wrong room. The key card was tucked into the inside pocket of my blazer like a dare. No hotel logo, just a white sleeve and the slant of a single initial across the flap, R, followed by a room number, 1211. Underneath, in smaller ink as if embarrassed by itself, if you still want the truth. I found it after the opening, in the soft wash of a gallery that smelled like wet wool and champagne promises, when everyone else was arguing about whether the neon was ironic enough. I don't collect keys that aren't mine. I mend things quietly. I paint signs, coaxing letters to stand up straight without having to shout. I live with Theo, who knows how to hang a painting so the wall forgets it used to be a wall. We've been together long enough to keep the good bowls within reach, and to retire the word always except for tea and the recurring joke about how our kettle chooses drama over boiling. The card in my pocket was not a joke. It warmed to my chest like it had ideas. A week earlier I'd found a receipt from the Skylark Hotel in the pocket of Theo's overcoat, which I pretended was a laundry worker's mistake until I remembered he never takes that coat to the cleaner. Tuesday he'd said the museum dinner ran late. Wednesday he'd smelled like cedar, which is not the museum's fragrance. I wanted to ask a clean question, and the key card did it for me without words. I walked to the hotel because the train would have added people I didn't owe explanations to. The Skylark is one of those places that pretends it invented discretion. The lobby was the color of forgiven sin. In the elevator mirror, my face had the honesty of something you can't frame. Room 1211 was at the end of a corridor that practiced silence like a language. The door opened before I knocked. A man stood there with the kind of calm that isn't innocence. He was taller than I expected, dark hair that had started the night neat and given up somewhere around the second drink. Shirt unbuttoned just enough to invite a story. I'd met him once at an opening when labels were being swapped. He'd been near Theo's elbow in that way people are when elbows matter. Julian, he said, like the test question whose grading rubric was already drawn. Raphael, I said. The initial inked itself in my head with too much elegance. You invited me. Because I don't want to keep being the plot twist, he said, stepping back from the doorway. And because truth isn't something I can text. Two glasses sat on the table, one smudged by a mouth that preferred to linger on the rim. The curtains had let the city in just far enough to pretend the room had a skyline. There was a jacket on the chair that wasn't mine and was Raphael's. I knew the cut. It had watched Theo choose it. Where is he? I asked, because it felt more adult than why. 10 minutes out, he said. He thinks he's meeting me to end something with style. I've always thought endings hate style, I said. They want plain English, water on the table, and someone willing to use their inside voice. Raphael watched my mouth when I said inside voice, which is a habit men develop in rooms where people lie. He closed the door and leaned against it like it had volunteered to keep a secret. When he spoke next, his voice had lost the angle it arrived with. I've been seeing him for 8 months, he said. It began with a wrong lobby and a right elevator and 1,000 excuses that sounded like scheduling. It continued because we kept choosing verbs that didn't require us to say nouns. He said the word pause a lot. I thought that meant permission. And now, I asked. The carpet looked expensive enough to disapprove of my shoes. And now he texts me a picture of your kettle when he's trying to be funny, Raphael said, a small mercy of a smile opening and shutting on its own. And now I'm in a room with your name in my mouth and a chest that smells like his cedar. And now I'm tired of calling this gravity. I stood by the window because the glass didn't owe me loyalty. The city did its laundry beneath us, glitter hung up to dry. My hands knew where to be. Not in my pockets, not on the table, not anywhere that could be mistaken for prayer. I heard Raphael move, not like a threat, more like a breath that believed in its own conditions. "Why invite me instead of simply ending it?" I asked. "Because I don't like leaving messes for other people to mop," he said. "Because you looked me in the face at the museum and called the neon excessive without asking to be congratulated. Because you paint open on doors like it's not a threat. Because I could keep pretending this is a storm we tripped into, or I could do the unromantic thing and bring you to the room where the weather is made." There, the first sting, just under my ribs where pride keeps its spare keys. I wanted to grab the jacket and throw it at him. I wanted to sit down and write a list of questions I could ask without shaking. Instead, I walked my hands to the table and poured water into the less smudged glass and drank. The throat doesn't know the difference between someone else's story and a desert. Raphael's eyes found my mouth again. "You make that look like something worth copying," he said, soft. I felt I shouldn't like the way he looked at me and discovered I did anyway. That's the jagged truth. In betrayal's heat, you start to understand your own appetites as if they were tools laid on a workbench. Blunt, reliable, not made for display. "Do you want me to hit you?" I asked, "or to pass you a towel?" He exhaled a laugh that could have been a wince. "If we were a worse pair of men," he said, "we would be kissing by now and calling it conscience." He came closer, close enough for fabric to learn about the other's laundry. His shirt smelled like the same cedar that had followed Theo home 2 nights before. My hands remembered, traitors and archivists at once. He didn't touch me, not right away. He slowed, as if the space between us deserved the courtesy of a measured approach. "I'm not asking for absolution," he said. "I'm asking to be believed when I tell you that I didn't want him to be a person I'm proud of only when you're not in the room." "Believe you," I said, hearing the word in Theo's mouth more than my own, the way he makes it sound like a lesson plan. "Then what? The jacket goes back on and the three of us learn how to co-teach a class on civility." He didn't back away. "Then you tell him exactly what you need, and he finally chooses whether to be the man who can listen." We were close enough now that breath had politics. The slope of his throat was the exact depth of a confession I didn't want to make. He raised a hand and stopped it at my shoulder the way a man breaks before a cliff he knows he might love. The heat of him felt like a sentence that knew it would be cut off. "You could have slept with him in a room I never knew," I said, and my voice surprised me by being calm. "You could have sent an email and made me the villain of your relief." "You weren't supposed to be this interesting," he said, the edges of his mouth compromising with honesty. "That's the problem with other people. They keep being people." He moved his hand that last inch and set it on my shoulder, a gentle weight that had none of the insult of mercy. It was the most erotic moment of the night, not because of the contact, but because of the care. The pace of it, the goal-less quality, the way his fingers did not tighten as if to claim, but rested as if to check we were both in the same room. My body answered, which is something bodies do when asked politely. Heat is heat. It doesn't file paperwork before arriving. The hallway filled with footsteps, the confident kind that had never once asked a door to consider itself. The latch turned. Theo came in with his cedar and his coat, and a face you make when 2 stories meet at a corner you didn't measure. He saw the water, saw the distance, saw my shoulder under Raphael's hand. He didn't look at the bed because men who hang paintings know where not to look first. "Okay," Theo said, which is a word people use when rooms tilt and you decide not to fall. I stepped away so my face wouldn't be writing the script for the next 5 minutes. Theo set his coat over the same chair I'd inventoried as mine earlier and then amended the inventory with a glance at me. He didn't lean against anything. He stood like a painting hung by a cautious person, two hooks, a sense of level. "If you need me to go," Raphael said to both of us, "I will." "You invited him," Theo said to him, not unkind. "That's new." "I didn't want to be the letter R anymore," Raphael said. "I wanted to be an adult with a spine and a mouth." Theo nodded, set his bag down, reached for nothing. His eyes found mine. The kettle flash of our kitchen crossed both faces. I experienced the indecent relief of recognizing him, even here. That was its own betrayal. "I slept with him," Theo said, to the room. "I told myself it started with a lobby and a rainy night and the polite kind of hunger, and that I could keep it in parentheses. Then I texted him photos of our breakfast when the museum bored me, and I laughed at your jokes when I should have told you I needed a different one. If we were a better pair of men, this speech would have timing." "There are worse crimes than speeches," I said, and watched Raphael breathe like a man who wasn't sure if forgiveness was an item you could buy in this lobby. "How long?" "8 months, Theo said. The jacket on the chair creased like it had a back. "It wasn't because you were failing anything. It wasn't because he was better at something. It was because I forgot that comfort and dullness aren't synonyms and thought electricity meant newness instead of work." It was not noble that I wanted to be held while he said that. It was not disgusting either. Our bodies are drugs and we've been taught to be suspicious of dosage. I walked to the window because the city doesn't get to evaluate your face. I put my hand on the glass and was grateful for the cold. Behind me, the men I loved and refused to adore adjusted their positions on a rug I was not emotionally paying for. "What do you need?" Theo asked, and for once the question didn't feel like a test he'd already scored. "I need you to admit you liked being two people," I said. "I need you to talk about how you talked about me when you weren't with me. I need you to stop arranging thought around this to make us feel clever. I need the workbench, not the lecture hall." Theo's mouth did the thing it does when it regrets being a mouth. "I liked being applauded for saying the right words to the wrong person," he said. "I liked the attention of an audience that hadn't seen my last act. I liked the cedar. Then I hated the cedar. Then I hated me." "And me?" I asked, turning from the window. "You," he said, and it was the oldest prayer I know. "You I kept going home to. I thought it made me righteous. It just made me inaccurate." "That is a good sentence," Raphael said, a cracked laugh around it. "I hate that it's true." "Here's the part no one writes down," I said, surprised by how steady my voice had become. "All three of our bodies are still in this room. The physics of that matters. I can feel your breath without needing it in my mouth. That doesn't make me noble, it makes me human. So we're going to have to let the heat exist without mistaking it for instruction." We were 3 men in a hotel room that had only learned our names that hour and already had opinions. I picked up the hanger with the ticket and put it on the back of the chair because my hands needed to do something decent. Somebody's pulse slowed by a beat or two. From the alley came an unembarrassed shout, life doing its uncurated business. "I'm not going to kiss you," I said to Raphael, who had returned to the door as if it had hired him. "Not because I don't want to, because wanting is not the same as choosing." "I can work with that," he said, relieved in a way I didn't expect to enjoy witnessing. "And I'm going to leave without finishing a scene." He picked up his bag and took his cedar with him. He paused, not for effect, to let the hinge do its job. The door closed. The carpet decided it was carpet again. Theo and I sat on the edge of the bed like it was a bench in a less dramatic room. His hands hovered near mine because touch was not an entitlement this hour had earned. He looked at me like the museum looks at a frame, wary, hopeful, aware that wood does what it can. "What do you want to do?" he asked. The bravest question is sometimes also the stupidest because it has too many answers. "Work," I said. "We're going to work, not perform. We're going to walk home and you're going to sleep on the not guest couch, and tomorrow you're going to tell me everything twice, once with the clever words and once with the small ones. And I'm going to decide what future my hands can hold, and you're going to accept it without writing a speech for it." He nodded like bolts nod. He didn't cry, which I still love him for. We stood because sitting had surrendered the last of its neutrality. He reached for his coat. I did not help him into it. In the elevator, we watched our faces admit the city had changed by a millimeter. On the walk home, we didn't touch. We kept the air honest. At a crosswalk, we waited for the white figure because old knees deserve seconds, and so did we. Near our door, we stopped, not dramatically, just enough to let the key agree with the lock without intimidation. Inside, the apartment smelled like cumin. The kettle made its unnecessary noises. The good bowls were visible. I put the ticket on the counter and the hanger on a hook. We stood the way you stand when a storm has decided to take a nap. If another ticket with my name arrives on an empty hook, I won't pretend it's the universe or an enemy. I'll bring water. I'll sit where the room can see me. I'll ask for truth in a language our bodies can carry. I'll let heat be heat and not an order. And when I attach leather to leather, or wood to wall, or two men to a future that might have to change its mind about us, I'll use the knot my grandfather taught me. Plain, stubborn, the one that holds without needing velvet rope. If that looks less like a finale and more like repair, it will have been, at last, the right room.